Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going beyond basic film criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari, and with me today is...
Adam Perry.
And what are we overanalyzing this week?
This week we are overanalyzing Babylon.
Directed and written by Damien Chazelle, an original epic set in 1920s Los Angeles led by Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and Diego Calva, with an ensemble cast. A tale of outsized ambition and outrageous excess, it traces the rise and fall of multiple characters during an era of unbridled decadence and depravity in early Hollywood. What did you think?
What did I think? It was bad. I don't know. It was pretty flawed, is the charitable read for me. They get ripped off a ton of other movies that, you know, I think I made a list, and it's all stuff that I know for a fact you don't care for. Like a lot of Scorsese in the early 90s, and it basically was Boogie Nights. Like it's the same exact movie as Boogie Nights.
That is an insult to Boogie Nights, and I will not have it.
But I mean, like, the beats are exactly the same, and, like, he's trying to do the same sort of thing, and parts of it were good and worked, and parts of it were just, like, really stupid and childish, and I think, you know, it's I'm the same age as the director, and I saw a lot of, like, the childish humor in that, like, kind of, like, generation of people, like of just like just oddly placed bathroom humor for no reason, and like people stating their intentions at the screen, and then there would be really, really cool sequences, like the first, like when they're making the epic fight movie and Margot Robbie's doing her first on-screen acting. Like those scenes are really good and they really work, but they're surrounded by just like sloppy, incoherent, not good, excessive work. To me, makes it like an interesting failure, but like definitely not good.
Okay, so the only way I could describe this movie to people was excruciating. As in, I hated almost every minute of the 3+ hours I was sitting in that theater. And I did this to myself. I'll have you know, both Adam and I predicted that this would be bad, and we chose to do it anyway, and I had no idea it was going to be quite this bad.
I will, like, the party sequence that the movie opens with, so me and the person I saw it with, my wife, we were the only people in the theater on a Thursday night, which, you know, isn't that crazy, but I thought there would be somebody else. To the point where I'm in there taking notes. I have a pink pen and I can't see my paper. And she leans over and sees me trying to write. She'll use your phone. There's nobody else. So I'm like using my phone to write notes. And the main party that kind of sets up the movie where a lot of our characters meet is about maybe I think it's like a 25-minute sequence. According to IMDb, it's 27 minutes before the main title shows. And that whole thing is that party. I wanted to leave. Like, if I weren't doing the movie for the podcast, I would have
100%.
I was so bad.
I had to check my watch a couple times because I couldn't stand it. It was so bad. Yeah, I was like, So, like last week sometime, you know, I was watching some streaming thing that I have, and like, you know, they're giving advertisements for movies, and they were advertising that Tarzan, the new one.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, I have like selective, like I completely blocked out the fact that Stacey and I saw that for the podcast, and it was so bad.
Oh yeah,
like,
it's Margot Robbie's in that movie too.
It was like the worst movie I've ever seen for the podcast, and then High Life, and now it's bad. This was like, I wanted to leave and I could not, and I was like angry that I was trapped in the theater.
Yeah,
But my two notes was it was too dark. That was very annoying. It was very dark all the time, and I couldn't even see what was going on. And it was like too many bodily fluids. I'm like, I don't appreciate scatalogical humor in the slightest.
Yeah, the one that really I just when he's so the whole thing is like the talking picture comes out, and Brad Pitt's a famous silent actor, and he's talking with, I guess it's his producer in the bathroom, and he says, do people even care about sound in their movies? And the next thing is like someone just taking a huge dump. And I'm just like, if it's embarrassing me, it's pretty bad. Like, it's like, I have a very low taste. I think that stuff is kind of funny, but it was just like, come on, bro. Like, get it together. What are you doing? Like, what even is this? And it's like the whole rest, it doesn't fit with the movie at all, which is so, like, I feel like he kind of, like, a charitable read is that he's like kind of, I don't know, making, like, the whole theme of the movies not being serious comes up again and again. And this is like being for, you know, poor people or ignorant people. And I don't know if that's his way of kind of like nodding to that. I think that any kind of read like that is too, like, it's too much of a leap. Yeah. If that makes sense. You know, like, it doesn't explain why this stuff is in the movie at all, and it doesn't fit, and it's just really weird.
Exactly. You have, like, this whole long party sequence where, like, Margot Robbie does this whole, like, dance or whatever, and she's wearing, like, next to nothing in this tiny dress.
That seemed no fun at all. None.
Yeah, which was what I was about to say. So, like, point one, and I'll circle back to this at some point, hopefully, the Lady Faye character, I was like, was sexier in a 3-piece suit than Margot Robbie was. Yeah. And next to nothing, like, there was, and I think I read a review, and the person said, and which sums it up, was like, this movie was completely joyless. Yeah. There was nothing, that party didn't look fun to attend, even slightly. And you're like, how, you made a whole movie about hedonism and excess, and you made it look, again, completely joyless, not fun, not sexy, or like, why is anybody going to any of these parties? Like,
yeah, and the most fun that I had during the movie were the most stressful scenes. I thought that when they do the initial setup where the Manny character he worms his way into Brad Pitt's set, and he's trying to get them a camera, combined with Margot Robbie doing the silent movie with this other movie star. I thought that scene was really good because it was kinetic, it was intense, and there was a lot going on. It had a lot of people that looked like the people making the movies looked like they were having fun, and it was neat to see these sort of like day players that were like not paid at all to be in these movies, and that was really cool. But then it's surrounded by just like this like very poorly done like rise and fall story, and like no one just like having any fun.
Yeah, so I agree with you. Like, the only so I really liked Lady Faye, and every scene she was in, she stole from everybody else, number one. And number two, there were a lot of like super clunky monologues about the importance of cinema and blah, blah, blah. And the only person, in my opinion, I'm curious to see if you agree, who absolutely nailed that monologue was Jean Smart.
Yeah, that was great. I'm a sucker for the, when, spoiler alert, Brad Pitt's producer friend, played by Lucas Haas, is having problems the whole movie, and he kills himself. And, you edit that out if you don't want that.
No, we spoil everything, you know that.
At this point, at least. But when at this point, Brad Pitt, it's like a running joke that he has a ton of wives. He's on, I think, like wife number 5. And he lashes out at her because she's a theater actress. And that, I thought, was good. This sort of like, you're not, like, what you're doing this for, like, what, 75 people a night or whatever it is. When it, like, tied into what was going on in the movie, it was done well. Jean Smart's was the best, but the one where, like, the first one where Brad Pitt falls off the balcony, that's, like, that was embarrassing. That was and just not his fault, but, like, I wonder if you're talking to me right now. Like, it was terrible.
It was terrible. And even, and to that end, like, I love Brad Pitt. I like Margot Robbie, too. I liked her in pretty much everything I've seen her in. And so, like, it's got to be director because but her character, so...
it seemed like an SNL sketch of her, like Wolf of Wall Street.
It was so one note.
The Joker's girlfriend, I'm blank. The
Harley Quinn.
Yeah, it was like that. Like, basically, it was those two characters combined, but with none of the like, even when she attempted to, like, feel like have some backstory, we got, like, Eric Roberts in the movie, there was, like, nothing to it.
You got one scene where she goes to visit her mother, and you're like, this was a waste of time in a very long movie. Also, the whole sequence is Diego Calva and Tobey Maguire. I was like, you could have cut this entire thing out of the movie and served the plot not at all. It was a complete waste of time. Like, why was this extended? And it was just a more grotesquerie. And I was like, why was this even in the movie?
I wrote, this is the Alfred Molina part in Boogie Nights. That was when I really, like, the movie tipped its hand to that influence to me. It was like, oh, well, it's just like throwing this, like, late in the game, like, crime part. And I kind of have to admit that I liked seeing Tobey Maguire in the movie. I forgot how much I kind of enjoy his presence, especially as, like, kind of a villain. But it was just not necessary at all. Like you say, it did nothing because there, like, that trouble was already happening to these people, and it just felt like an unnecessary sort of, like, amplification, an excuse to have some violence that just didn't fit. Again, like, this movie is full of parts that just don't fit.
Bring him back into the movie because there was no reason for him to even talk to her again, and, like, him wanting to rescue her was, like, annoying. I call this the Gatsby effect, if I haven't brought this up before on the podcast, which is that when a dude or a woman is in love with somebody who is, like, a total a-hole, and, like, their noble characteristic is supposed to be their, like, devotion to this person who's just an a-hole. Like, I have no respect for you for loving somebody who's terrible.
It's the Too Dumb to Live, but for love stories, basically.
Yeah, Too Dumb to Love. How about that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so you're like, I have, like, no respect for him that he even wants to bail her out. She's, like, a hot mess of a person, and but she's so one note. They don't give her any redeeming qualities. They don't make her interesting in any possible way, and it's like, it's almost like an objectification in the sense of, like, they're just counting on the fact that she's pretty that we're gonna like her. I don't know. Yeah,
there was something, I mean, I really enjoyed, like, she can do that so well, like, that just attitude, and I liked it in her feud with the Samara Weaving character was great. Like, those were funny scenes to me. And when they do the first Sound movie with her, I thought that was a really great scene. But there's not a lot outside of, like you said, they're one note. The main guy could have just not even been in the movie
yeah.
And that's not, I thought he gave a fine performance. It wasn't
around, slightly open mouth.
He was fine. You know, he wasn't, to me, it was like a nothing performance. Like, it didn't move the needle one way or the other. I thought that he did a good job enough, but, like, the character, like, when they totally shoehorn in the not to, like, get ahead of ourselves, but, like, the stuff with the Hays Code and her being, like, too vile and like R-rated basically for these people, like, that just felt like it, like, came out of nowhere in the movie. Him being a studio executive, like, just, it seemed like it, like, was like watching that title be invented on the spot, and it's like, I don't think it went down that way. Like, I don't think that this is how this goes down ever, like, in life. It just seems so weird. Like, all of a sudden he's a movie producer. Like, what? Like, what's going on? But yeah, it was so chaotic, and I don't know. Like, the fun, like, I do think it rebounded from the party scene for me, but yeah, it was just not good.
Yeah. Yeah, so I completely agree with you. The only scenes in the movie that I actually liked, the filming of the, like, epic war tale, like, that whole thing, the race for the camera, just, like, watching what an absolute, there's no other word for this, shoot show that set was, and people getting injured, and the animals, and, like, yeah. That was really fun. I also enjoyed the, like, Margot Robbie scenes where they're filming her silent films, right? And you see this, like, female director, of which there were. Like, they got all that right. The first Sound filming scene would have been great, except for the fact that you have a movie that's trying very hard to give a sense of, like, hey, like, there's, Lady Faye is, like, an Anna May Wong tribute. You have Sidney Palmer and his racist experiences in the film, and then in the middle of this like sound filming of this scene, there's like this extended anti-Semitic rant, and I was like, why was that in there? And like, where was like any sensitivity to, you know, like Jewish people in that scene? Like, it was very bizarre, and it was so like, oh, I'm sorry, so we have to like, you can treat other people with some sort of acknowledgement of the historical oppression, but like, yeah, if you're Jewish, too bad. Like,
and that it made no sense, because that wasn't really like there wasn't directed at like a specific character, like, hey, here's how it was like this certain group experienced this kind of treatment. I feel like it was weird, because the one instance with Sidney Palmer that kind of like stuck in my mind was when he's they're all at the party where Margot Robbie basically has her big meltdown, which I thought was great. They do this bit where like you'll see where other people are at the party, and they cut back to Sidney Palmer, whatever I forget what the character's is. That's the character's name too. Yeah. He's sitting and by himself, and people will come up to him, and it's like almost like the like sort of like low key racism of today that people say, and it just like felt very like weird for that to be what was going on in 1920.
Yeah.
And it almost seemed that the others, or the, you know, the scene at the dry cleaners, it was almost like that's what it would be like now, and it would have been way worse then. Right. And then you have this very jarring, screaming rant that at minimum was just like, it didn't make any sense and was out of place, and was just, it was like, why did that happen? Yeah. Why was that even in the movie?
Right,
it made
exactly.
no sense. Is it like, what was that a reference to? I mean, it was just like, are you trying to like wake me up here? Because you did, but
yeah,
I'm, like, snoozing. But
it was like, it was so weird, and especially when you're talking about, again, early Hollywood, right? You have Max Minghella in there playing a real person. Like, you have all these like, you know, like, it's a fact. Like, Mayer was Jewish. Like, Goldwyn was Jewish. Like, you have all that early Hollywood. All those people were Jewish who ran the studio. So it's like, if you want, you have all of this thing that you could tackle or look at or say something about. And then you just have a bit character give another bit character, like, a tirade of anti-Semitic slurs. And you're like, what was, it just was so out of place.
It was almost like an afterthought, which to me is like very disrespectful.
Yeah.
It's like you can't even figure out a way to kind of engage with this behavior. So you're just like, oh, or like, let's throw in something about the Jews too. Like, that's kind of how that felt. Like, you know, like, all right, we've got all our bases covered. Like, and it's just like, it made no sense. And I feel like I was like uncomfortable in a theater where I was the only, like, we were the only people in there. And I was just like, oh, makes me, but not in a like a thought provoking uncomfortable, like a good uncomfortable quote. It was just like, it's more like almost like, it's like, come on, Chazelle. Like, it was just, what are you doing?
Yeah, it was just so bizarre. So I just, so it was like, that scene would have been great. And like, the frustration of it was so real. So it seemed to me, bizarrely, that what this movie was trying to be about was like, this is the real people that Singin' in the Rain was based on. So that part was very strange, because so you have that scene, there are all the scenes, and then they replay them from Singing in the Rain, just in case you missed it. There were lots of scenes where you're like, this is directly taken from Singin' in the Rain. And that whole scene of her filming that first thing, and was like there's a scene very similar to that in Singin' in the Rain. And so I was like, well, this is good, but this is also just like, it was way funnier in Singin' in the Rain. Like, the actress has a line where like, they're just like, they keep moving the microphone because she can't get her voice into the microphone, and they're like, they stick it in like some like shrubbery on the set, and she has this great line where because it's supposed to be a love scene, she's like, you had me making love to a bush. Like, It's very funny.
I need to watch that movie again. I haven't seen it in probably about 10 years.
Yeah, and so it was just like, I was like, I mean, this was good, but it was better and less anti-Semitic.
The scene, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's... So I got out of it. I was like, okay, well, it rebounded a little bit from the beginning, but...
Yeah, it was like... So, and then I just thought, what did you make of the, like, well, kind of like the literal ending?
Oh, man. So, all right. Here's where I was at that point in the movie. You have... Some of the stuff that I kind of liked. I did like that the year was specified really well and gave you a good sense of sort of like time in the characters' lives. So you got Manny's returned to LA 26 years after the movie's begun, and he's with his family who's never been to LA, and he goes to the movies, and I'm like, all right, like I see where you're going here. And they're watching the Singing in the Rain movie, and it has like the close-up of him crying, and then the camera just zooms out on all the audience members, and then above, you like have the bird's eye view. If it had ended there, I would be much kinder to the film, but no, you get a Spike Lee ripoff montage of just movies, and not only is that infuriating, but it starts with scenes from his own movie that we just watched. The first scenes are of him and Margot Robbie meeting, them making the movies. Why was that part of that horrible idea? And then it ends. I feel like I think the last new movie in it was Avatar. And it was just like, I was seething. It was so bad. It was the worst thing ever.
Kubrick, I was trying to count. I was like, Kubrick was in there. Scorsese was in there. I was like, who did he, like, Spielberg was in there.
Yeah, for sure. Star Wars. There was some Star Wars stuff.
And it was just like, they kind of hit, but that's not even the end, because then it just goes like primary colors, and then it goes to some weird, like, lava lamp.
I thought that was like film being developed.
BS.
Was that what that was?
I have no idea. It was just
stupid. If that's what it was, it was dumb. And it was also kind of like very like my first film book movies that they pulled from for that montage.
Yeah.
You know, like, important stuff, for sure.
Joan of Arc was in there.
But it was just like, all right, guy. Like, it made me so mad. It basically, whatever was good about it before that was totally ruined by that ending. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. It's laughable. It was terrible. So bad.
It was so bad. And I think, and so what was interesting for me watching this movie is, so, you know, the episode we just did, Empire of Light, was also a movie about the value of movies, right? But, like, also sort of a period piece set in the 80s.
Was it any good?
It was lovely. It was good. Cool. It's totally worth seeing. But and so you have a very small, a very intimate, very few cast members, very few speaking parts, basically like one location, 2 location film sets. You know, you have this like small, intimate character study movie, and then you have Babylon, both trying to tell you the same message.
Yeah.
And you know, so it was really hard for me just coming off of seeing Empire of Light, not to compare the two, where like Empire of Light, every monologue or discussion anyone had about like the value of movies was just absolutely nailed in Empire of Light. Like, you were like, yes, that's why we need to go to. I mean, like, preaching the choir, right? Like, yeah. But this movie made me like I hate the movies and I hate you. Like, I was like, you like almost talked me out of going to the movies. It was so bad.
The note I wrote was, because it's portraying a time where there are fewer films being made, obviously, than today. And I wrote that this movie makes a compelling argument for that being like an enforceable thing. Like, that's just, right. You know, because, I mean, I stole this line from a podcast I was listening to about Avatar, oddly, but it's like this movie, I think it's cost like something like $80 million to make, and they should have lit that money on fire in a field. Like, that's kind of what happened. You know, it just...
I mean...
It was a disaster.
It was a disaster, and I was just... So Avatar is a good example, and I was thinking of 2001, like, I was thinking of, like... So first of all, giving him an unlimited budget and complete artistic control was a terrible idea, right?
For this movie.
Yeah, for Babylon.
Yes, absolutely.
And then I was like, can I say it's always a terrible idea? And I was like sort of trying to think of like historical examples where other directors were given that level of control and still did a good job.
Well, I'm struggling to think about, in regards to this person in particular, this guy, Damien Chazelle, who I'll say the only other film of his I've seen is First Man, which is very good, in my opinion.
I've seen Whiplash, and that's the only one I've seen.
So, what did he do to earn this?
La La Land, right?
Yeah, but that movie, you know, it I believe made money. The other two, I think Whiplash made some money, First Man didn't. And I'm just like, this is your body of work, is these three movies. And, like, you get $80 million to make this? It was very weird to me. If that's the case. Like, I just don't understand that at all.
I have been on a rant lately, and it's my podcast, so I get to give it again. Yeah. About, so, you know, I work sort of in the financial industry, and there's been a lot of talk about this Sam Bankman-Fried character, right, who is now been arrested from the Bahamas and extradited back to America for running this he ran this cryptocurrency exchange, and then it turns out he was just, like, borrowing money from all kinds of different companies that he wasn't supposed to be in control of, and like basically doing a whole lot of creative accounting to fake that this business was doing really well when it wasn't. And he was 30 years old, and he was just like 3 months ago he was being touted as this amazing wunderkind. They used the fact that he played on his phone during an entire meeting as a credit to like how smart he was.
I don't want to live in this world.
I don't want to live in this world
That's so
either.
Terrible.
And I'm like, you have him, you have Adam Newman, the WeWork guy, and I was like, you've Elon Musk, like, and I'm just like, what? I just don't understand why people keep falling for this, for somebody's own hype, right? And it's the only thing I can imagine about Chazelle was like, he told them like, I'm amazing, I won with La La Land, I'm such a freaking cinematic genius, you should give me a ton of money, which
he also didn't win. Like, he fake won.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Like and that was another movie where I feel like that has aged poorly. And I mean, I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it, so I got nothing.
I'd probably rather watch Babylon again than watch La La Land.
No, I think I'd have to take La La Land because it's just a shorter runtime. Also, and like, I can't deal with all the like bodily fluid stuff. That's just nasty.
I know when it's coming. I feel like I can turn away, but that's just to me an extreme way of saying how little I want to watch that movie.
Yes, agreed.
But you know, I that makes sense. You know, these high on his own supply, and if that's what went down, it's what went down, but there's just no sensible explanation for it. Like, I mean, if I were running a movie studio, this like Paramount made it, right? It's like a big-ish studio. And then another thing that kind of like this wandering a little off topic, it kind of felt like a response to like as far as like the things that this movie ripped off of. He kind of seemed to position himself as like an anti-David O. Russell with this movie. Like, I kept thinking of American Hustle and how that movie was full of cursing and sort of like the adult-oriented drama, but it very much shied away from the drug use and things like that. And this kind of seemed like a response to that, where it's like, well, we're going to just have cocaine everywhere and not care. And it's like, you know, it seemed like he's trying to like make himself like the edgier version of this guy. who also inexplicably keeps getting a lot of money to make a lot of movies. They had the two of them had the Amsterdam failure was right before this, and then this failed even worse.
Yeah.
Which is like, it just drives the comparison home.
Yeah, I just don't understand where you're like, here's like this supremely confident dude who's telling you how amazing he is, and you're like, yeah, let's just give him a lot of money and not do any due diligence, and you're like, what about this is so seductive to you? Because I just like, I don't know. It's like I want the opposite, you know, like I want a nerd, I want a technician, I want somebody who's like, has a little humility, who understands how things can go wrong. Like, I don't want this person in charge of anything with a lot of money.
And I mean, I think that's like kind of like, you know, who knows what goes on behind closed doors, but I think the result
of
speculation,
that's for sure.
But the movie you see on screen, to me, very much supports someone having all the control.
Yeah.
And how the movie goes and what's in it and how long it is.
I mean, they should have given it to somebody else to edit.
Yeah, I mean, minimum. So, you know, like, the result is the result. And it bears out that one person is responsible for the vision, and it was insanely flawed in a lot of ways. Not, you know, like I said, there's things that I actively I don't think I was like you. I was like having fun at points in the movie for sure. And a lot of that was the high of it not continuing to be as bad as the beginning. But it you know, overall was infuriating. I mean,
it just like wasn't fun to me in most parts. Because I just disliked Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt so much. So, and they took up, and then Diego Cal. I disliked the three leads intensely. So it was like when anything was ever focused on somebody else, I was like, this isn't so bad. And again, I do think, I mean, so like just even from the technical aspects, like, I mean, there was a lot of like swooping camera, and there was the like back and forth, like pan back and forth, and I was like, that's very annoying. That's not.
No, it had none of the style of the movies that it was aspiring to be in the company of. So something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is another good example of, I feel like, what this movie kind of wished it was. Where, say what you want, at least like with Quentin, you're getting a very distinct sort of style to the movie, a pop to the movie. Like, things, like I said, are kinetic. There's, like, it's a world, it's vibrant. No,
that's such a good point.
And this was just so flat and, like, not, what's the word? It was not quite, I don't mean to be as, like, dark as, like, soulless, but it was basically anonymous, you know, like, it was
anonymous is the perfect,
you know, nothing about this, there was no style to this movie, there was no signature. It's not like there are movies you watch of, you know, a lot of like the greats working today where it's like, you know who made this movie.
That's perfectly put. That is exactly put. And that's like the difference between him and Stanley Kubrick, right? You see a Kubrick movie, you know it's a Kubrick movie. You just can tell, right? You see a Spielberg movie, you know it's a Spielberg or Soderbergh, you know, I'm trying to think of other like modern contemporaries of Chazelle, and he was a bit young on that side. But even Barry Jenkins, right? Because Moonland won.
Yeah. Over La La Land.
Over La La Land. Yeah. And you're totally right. You sit this down and you ask me who directed it, I just wouldn't be able to know. It has no voice in that sense.
There's no signature.
Whereas
he's the worst part of that movie.
Right.
Like, for sure.
Right. Whereas like Empire of Light, again, like
he's another person whose movies you can tell right off the bat
you're like,
his.
it's so it's crafted with that level of detail and cinematography where you're like, this is Sam Mendes and Richard Deakins. Like, I can tell. Yeah. I know it's him, right? And so that's what I think I was trying to say. Was like, who would you give an unlimited budget to? And you're like, you wouldn't give this level of creative control to somebody who really just doesn't seem to have honed their creative voice.
But to your point about age too, like, sure, he's younger than all the people we just mentioned, but, you know, they were his age and younger when they started doing the things they're doing now. Paul Thomas Anderson comes to mind specifically as like I believe he made Boogie Nights when he was like 30 years old or something. You know, that's crazy. Or like Quentin Tarantino. I mean, Jaws. He was younger than I was. Yeah, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But yeah, he's like, you know, it's like I don't want to like swing on Chazelle too much personally because I don't like, you know, I don't know the guy and I'm sure he's not a horrible person. Like, you know, we don't know him, but it does seem very much like you've done not really much to earn what you're getting.
Right. And so I was just watching a video today about, you know, again, the death of the mid-budget movie, and they were like, this is why Knives Out is killing it. And they're totally right. Like, I really wanted to see Glass Onion in theaters and I missed it. And it was PO that they pulled it so quickly.
Yeah, it was like 3 days or something.
Yeah, it was like a week. And I was like, that stinks. Like, that completely stinks.
Yeah.
And Glass Onion was really fun and I very much enjoyed it.
The movie was great.
Yeah. And another one he has a pretty clear, if you put me down in one of his movies, I know it was him, right? To go on a tangent,
the part of his career that, and I don't necessarily hate this movie, but I really didn't want him to continue down the path of was the Brothers Bloom, where I'm like, you're not Wes Anderson, dude. Don't make this movie. And it wasn't, like, if you watch that, like, when I watched the actual movie, it's not quite that, but I was like, you don't need to go down this, like, sort of twee, otherworldly thing that he does well.
Right.
Or, like, that he does it, if you like it, it's successful, and if you don't, you get annoyed by it and don't watch it. And
once again, you 100% know a Wes Anderson movie from the trailer,
maybe more than any of the other people we've mentioned. Because I do like him. I think, you know, I like his stuff, and I'm glad he exists. It infuriates me in other ways as well, but...
I don't necessarily like it, but I to your point, I'm glad he exists. Back to what I was trying to say is that the mid-budget movie is, they were saying, like, in the death of the mid-budget movie, the issue with not having them greenlit is that you're not building the next generation of directors, right? Of auteurs, of young stars. If these movies don't exist anymore, like, you're not going to give somebody totally new.
Yeah, it's like a whole ecosystem that's dying out.
Yeah. So absolutely. And I was like, yeah, I think that's a good point. I personally, I think it's interesting. I mean, it's not a coincidence, obviously, with the pandemic, that everybody's making movies about why you should go to the movies again. Everyone's been predicting the death of the movie since the invention of the VCR, and I'm like, I am not that worried.
No, it's definitely always going to be something, you know. As long as the society we live in is intact-ish.
I mean,
you know, there's going to be movies, and they're in some form, they're going to be around.
Right. Yeah. And as someone who has to plan and make a podcast every couple of weeks, it has been harder. There isn't as much to see in theaters, that's for sure. But people like going to the movies, and I think, I don't know, I'm not so negative on it. And we've done another podcast on this topic, so I won't beat this dead horse. But I just like, if this is your case for why people should go to the movies, no one is going to go to them.
Yeah, and it's also like this movie, I feel like it's one of those cases where you can see the budget on the screen in not the best way. You know, like the only big sequences, like we talked about, that are really cool are the big battle scenes where they show I forget who. I wanted to say Flea, but he wasn't the German dude. But when they're like,
it was Spike Jonze.
Yeah, that's who I knew. It was somebody
Spike Jonze.
Weird. But when you see one of the cooler shots was like,
Otto Preminger?
Yeah, I guess that's who he was supposed to be.
It was my guess. Yeah.
The battle scene, and they're using real extras, and you see them running down the hill in the world of the movie, and then you see I think like a quick shot of the actual what the footage would have looked like for that movie, and there's something to be. I think the movie, I want to be kind of a little bit more charitable in my reads of some of the stuff that they're doing. That this is like kind of like maybe a call for you have real people as all the extras and stuff, and how much better some of that stuff looked, even if the technique for other things wasn't there yet. It wasn't fully evolved and developed. And this is like kind of some of the stuff that the movies got right away, was having lots of people, but it just got like any point like that, I feel like got drowned out by just like, oh, let's show people like doing drugs and committing crimes and not being shady and like not having fun parties and I don't know.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is another thing that I did really like about the movie. And in a way, in my little, like, super snobby, I like practical effects way, I was like, there were legitimate extras. There were a lot of people in this movie. Yep. And they flash back to the 20s where there were, like, lots and lots of people because you couldn't CGI an audience. Yeah. And I actually, it felt crowded. Yeah. And
lived in almost.
Yeah, and
for of all its others' faults.
I was like, I kind of forgot how much I enjoyed actually having like all of these extras. It was great. I really enjoyed it, and I was like, I didn't know I missed it until like you presented it to me again.
Horrible movie showed me.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. Oh, it was just a rough go though. Yeah. Any final notes?
I thought that Samara Weaving versus Margot Robbie was really good. So I just want to throw that out there again.
I'm going to throw out again. She is Hugo Weaving's niece.
Yeah, and the two of them look the same.
Yeah.
Like they're the same.
When I looked that up, I was like, niece? Niece, not daughter?
Pretty great. But yeah, it was a kind of a disaster.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So, to that end, this is one of those times in giving it a social impact score where I literally wanted to give it a negative score because I feel like this movie did harm. Right? Like, if you're worried about the demise of the mid-budget movie, this being a total flop and being so terrible, I don't think it's... Maybe it will get nominated for a couple technical awards. I don't even see the Oscars giving a nod to any of the lead actors.
It's like at a 55 on Rotten Tomatoes or something like that last time I checked.
It's made like single digits of money.
Yeah.
Like it
was like something like $3 million the first weekend or something. It was less than Amsterdam. That's all I know.
Yeah.
Shots fired at Amsterdam. So
I'm like, if nobody wants to like fund passion projects, like I just feel like this did harm. So I'm gonna have to give it a 1 as like I just hated this movie so much, and I think it was actively bad for society and films.
There's very base reasons why that's true. The fact that it cost so much money and lost it. I'm gonna controversial opinion. I'm gonna throw out a 2.
Yeah.
Just because there were some parts, if you're just thinking purely in watching a movie and feeling something, there are moments in this movie that hit home.
Yeah.
I think that make sitting through it one time, if you wanted to do it anyway, worthwhile. If you have no interest in it, never watch it. Ever.
Yeah.
But if you have like a small part of you is, all right, give it a shot, and you'll be rewarded with a few good moments surrounded by just infuriating
bodily fluids, surrounded by pooping,
peeing,
vomiting,
like projectile vomiting on people.
Yeah. I mean,
what is this?
Drooling,
eastbound and down, like.
I was like, okay, so we've got saliva, we've got vomit, we've
everything. But yeah, 2, disaster. Infuriating is the word of the day for this movie, but not.
No, I stand by excruciating.
Yeah.
I just wanted to leave. Tell us something we should see, read, listen to.
The movie I saw right before this was Tar, and that was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably, like, might unseat Massive Talent as the movie of the year for me for last year.
Okay. I'm going to plug... So, the Lady Faye character in this movie, who's the only one I liked, was sort of representing Anime Wong. She's going to be on a quarter. They're memorializing her on a quarter soon.
Oh, like a quarter.
In like the back, of a U.S. quarter. And so I kind of first really learned about her really recently. You know, film scholar that we all pretend to be. There's always more to learn. There's an excellent YouTube video from the women who make the take on the Dragon Lady trope, about Asian actresses on film, and they kind of go into a little bit of film history on Anime Wong. You should definitely check it out and sort of learn, again, the history of like Asian actresses through the ages. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, we're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Leave a comment wherever you find us. We'd love to hear from you. You can email us at moviesmatterpod@gmail.com. Check out our website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.
Just going to throw out there, too, that this podcast is not even a third the length of that stupid movie, so...